Break time. Taking a break is brought to you by our good friends up at Banks Boats. What is taking a break? Well, I guess I'd have to say it's everything else that I enjoy about our sport of waterfowling. It's all about the ducks, the dogs, and the decoys. And today, it's about camo dipping at Galley Graphics. Let's check it out.
Tom, now I've said a gun dipped. What are all the other things that you have had dipped or things you can dip?
That's a really good question. Pretty much anything that will take paint can be printed. Wood, metal, plastics are obviously the vast majority of the things that we get. When a customer first brings a part into us, the very first thing we have to do is prep it to be able to take a base coat paint. Depending on what it is, or plastic, we put a plastic polypropylene primer on there, which improves the adhesion of the base color. If it's a gun stock, we remove the old finish by sanding it in steel wool and getting it so it can be perfectly smooth. If it was an auto, like a wheel or something like that, it has to be sandblasted and cleaned up. So there's a wide variety of things we can prep. Skis, snowboards, guns, ATVs, snowmobiles, car parts, bug screens, fender flares, you name it, we printed it. Following the preparation, it's base coated. Base coating serves two purposes. Obviously, one of them is to provide a base for the ink to be printed on, and the second one is to provide the underlying color itself. The 1,000 or so patterns that are available all have a certain degree of translucency. So between 1,000 different patterns and dozens of different colors, you can get a completely different result because you actually will see the base coat color come through with the pattern laid over the top. In the case of camouflage, if you brought us a gun, the camouflage typically are a light tan, and it becomes actually part of the pattern itself. If there are other things like automobile parts, snowmobiles, and ATVs, the sky's the limit on colors. I mean, every bright color you can imagine with all the different patterns laid over the top. Following the base paint application, the product is prepped for dipping. Some products are put in fixtures and printed using the automated production arm where the part itself is actually precision dipped. Other parts really need to be dipped by hand. This whole process is where art meets science, and sometimes you just have to have the artistic touch of being able to print it perfectly, and that's where they'll print by hand. After the process of applying a fixture to the part to be printed, film itself will be cut to the approximate size of the part to be dipped. At that point, the film will be carried over to the production tank. It will be laid on the surface of the water and allowed to flatten out. It's like laying saran wrap or wax paper on the water when you first lay it. When the film hits the water, the very first thing they'll do is examine to make sure there's no air bubbles between the water and the film itself. If there are, you'll see them actually blow the bubbles out to the edge of the film where they can escape. You examine the film very, very closely during the period of time it's on the water, and it will begin to immediately relax as it begins to start to soften. Each piece of film has a different period of time or length of time that it has to remain on the water. Following that period of time, they'll spray on what's called an activator. That activator is the final stage in actually dissolving the film, so the only thing left on the surface of the water will be the ink. And when you see that application happen, you'll immediately see it turn from print on film to print literally floating on the surface of the water. At this point, the product is actually submerged in the ink where it's printed. Depending on the product, it's either affixed in a production arm or it's done through an automated process, or it's taken by hand and actually submerged in the ink by hand. Physics takes over at this point. The base paint is dry. The ink on the surface of the water is wet. As it's submerged, it literally prints that complex geometric shape. Once it's under the water, it's immediately removed. The residual ink that's on the surface of the tank doesn't make any difference at that point because it's wet. The part is already wet. It's already been printed. So when it's removed from the tank, that residual ink won't stick on there because it's no longer dry. The part is then removed from the tank and carried over to the stainless rinse station. It's a large station with spray nozzles throughout. It's a stainless steel tank with a stainless steel conveyor. It's placed on the conveyor, and it goes through a very slow warm water rinse process that takes 5 to 7 minutes. Once the part is dry, it's brought back into the paint booth where it was base painted, and it'll be clear coated. 2 coats of high quality automotive clear coat are applied. When the part has been completely painted, it's brought back into the dry room, clean environment where it's allowed to dry overnight. In addition to the custom work that we do, we have an extensive emphasis on high volume production products themselves. Take Firefly, for example. 10,000 of these came in black. They're in the middle of doing the camouflage run of these now. It's a fully automated process. We're able to do very, very large production runs, whether it's duck calls, tree stands. There's so many different products in the outdoor world that are camouflage printed. We're able to do very, very large production runs as well.
That's awesome. Tom, I want to thank you very much for having us out, showing us what's what, how you do it, informing us and educating us, as well as I'd like to thank you for being a sponsor to D3 TV. So without good companies like you, we can't be on the air. And again, I want to thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff. Appreciate it.
That was Taking a Break, sponsored by our good friends at Banks Boats. What an awesome process. We got to get these things rinsed, and let's get back to the hunt.